If you were ever able to get inside my mind and hear my thoughts, you would understand very quickly that they fray in a bunch of different directions. Professionally, I was a hockey player and now I'm a coach. So one would think that that's what I live and breathe, but that's not the case at all, actually. Though I love what I do, there is so much outside of the game that I'm hugely passionate about. I love music, guitars, motorcycles, the arts, and I've even come to love history and geography through my travels, if you can believe it. My podcast is about all of these things, and I speak with some really cool people that I've met throughout my career, and let the conversation kind of take off. So join me inside my brain, and welcome to my Motley Thoughts. Okay, a huge fist bump to everyone joining me today. Hope everyone is well through this continuing shit show. My guest today, I'm very excited to have him on. This episode is taking a bit of a hard right compared to the first couple of shows I did. A friend that I've met on my journey through life, he is an addiction specialist and the creator of the neural alignment model. Some of his work includes plant medicine healing, and we will definitely talk about psilocybin-assisted therapy and his use of this method. A fascinating gentleman that I can't wait to talk with. Time for some mushroom talk with my friend, Mr. Todd Ritchey.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. You know, I don't want to bullshit anyone and say great because it's a bit different right now, but all things considered, I'm doing well. And yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing great. I think people are getting bored of listening to all this COVID talk. And yet, how do you not talk about something that's so ever present and really affecting and influencing people's lives?
Yeah.
And so, it's been a transition for us. It's been a transition for the business, for sure. But I would say in general, we're lucky, I mean, I think when you have the right foundation and you have a good support network, you're one of the lucky ones. You end up making it through these types of challenges. And I think the fundamental belief system that I have with this type of adversity is that this is cliche, and yet if you can believe the cliche has real truth and meaning, then I think it can really contribute to your life. I mean, it's two ways of saying it. Pay attention to the collateral beauty is one, which is that when we go through real adversity, that there will be doors that are opening as well. And if we're paying attention, some version of sweetness or kindness or beauty or opportunity will present itself. And then, of course, the other cliche is for every adversity, there's an opportunity. For every door that closes, two doors open. And so if you're actually looking at it that way, believe it or not, you'll be more available. You'll be more prepared for when things show up.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the challenge is that so many people genetically or inherently have challenges doing that. Like for example, say someone like myself, it's kind of in my blood to kind of push forward and find solutions and try to, make things better. If something's shitty, try to push forward and make something better out of nothing. Whereas a lot of people have a challenge when it comes to that. Don't you think?
Yes, you posited that question in a really interesting way. Okay, so I have to answer that in a couple different ways, I think. Yeah, do I think that people have sort of proclivities towards certain tolerances, certain strengths, certain abilities, and then other proclivities towards certain weaknesses? Yeah. Do I think that they are genetic? Well, there's some evidence that they are. There's some evidence that there's some influence related to behavior that's genetic. But I think more importantly, the new terminology that we're using is epigenetic. In other words, what version of me has evolved and developed over my lifetime that has been affected in ways where there has been an environmental influencer that then makes me prone for genetic expression that manifests in different ways so that I become more vulnerable or less vulnerable.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily think people are born so that they're prone to suffer, that they're already inherently necessarily weak, or that they wouldn't be able to handle these things well. But over a lifetime, we become sensitized or strengthened.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I wasn't claiming to have proven that that it was genetic. It just seems, over time, and people you meet and cross paths with, that maybe it's more taught than anything, or just learned, or and maybe not genetic, like in the blood, but it just seems. I would say if you're around people, like-minded people, it kind of rubs off on you. It makes more sense that way. I wasn't trying to claim that I knew what I was talking about.
No, but I think it's a really valid point, right? Because certainly, some people believe that it's genetic. They believe that it's predetermined, and
Right.
they believe they're stuck with a bad hand. And that's a devastating thing. If you actually believe that, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
If you believe that you can't handle adversity, if you believe that you've been diagnosed from the age of 5 as, some diagnosis that limits your ability to manage life, or and that becomes an unconscious kind of excuse, and now you've got a label, got a diagnosis, you're on medication for it, and that medication doesn't really allow you to change it. It just kind of bandages it. And now you're sort of stuck, and it becomes a part of your identity. And now I am this dysfunction. Whether that's, I have ADHD. I hear people say to me all the time. And so I have ADHD, Todd, so I can't really focus for long periods. Instead of thinking, well, I've learned over the years how to manage my ADHD, and so my brain seems to have rebalanced, and I don't know what's happened, but I seem to be able to handle these things much better. But when you hang on to that old belief system, your brain will never change in a direction for the better.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of goes back to what I said in how what you're taught, and a lot of people that I know that have some of these challenges um, tend to play what you we've talked about this at length, the victim, and when you get caught in that loop, it's you kind of make things worse for yourself, and you can actually, if you wouldn't mind touching on that whole basis of how you explained it to me about the victim mentality.
Yeah. Without all the neuroscience and the psychobabble, you can actually look at this victim addiction dynamic. And if you can buy into it and see it in yourself or in the people you love, it can be very transformative and very quickly. And so what we've discovered is that, you can go through a lot of traumatic experiences in your lifetime, and you can fall into different dysfunctional behaviors or addiction or whatever it might be. And what we found is that all of those things actually heal, just like a wound, a cut, an injury. We are built to heal. And there's one thing that we discovered that actually prevent people from actually healing from psychological wounds and even physical disorders. And that is that as a byproduct of some horrific trauma, where a person was in fact being victimized, what happened is they adopted the identity and the narrative and the story of not just being victimized, but hanging on to that victimization, where they tell that story, where they feel the byproduct of it, and where in fact they become the identity of victim. And that victim can show up as poor me victim, it can show up as martyr victim, which look like opposite sides of the coin. But either version of martyr victim, where I'm going to sacrifice for everybody and I'll never complain about everything, and inevitably that person ends back up in victim. The martyr ends up on the cross with the spear in the side, and it doesn't end up so well.
Right.
And then the poor me victim is a very different type of victim, but the consequences are very similar. Women in our culture have been culturalized, and maybe it's biological as well, but have been culturalized in a way that they are more prone to the martyr victim. And if you're going to find victim in men, oftentimes it's more poor me. And that's just a gross generalization. I would say specifically men can be both, but I would say specifically that the vast majority of women, to me, that end up in sort of repetitive patterns of pain or dysfunction, that the majority of them have a martyr victim addiction. And so we call it an addiction dynamic because that victim actually locks in the dysfunction. That victim locks in the story. And so somebody goes through a trauma, we say there's like a fracturing of the psyche that happens, like a timeline is in fact, like a timeline is created. I'm speaking sort of metaphorically, but almost not really. And so that person almost gets locked in time, that altar that is fractured from the psyche, where the trauma happened at 7, is still 7 years old. And when that trauma is then re-triggered, that person adopts the beliefs and behaviors and feelings of that 7-year-old child. And you can literally watch that person almost morph into a 7-year-old, the way they'll throw a tantrum or the way they'll react or the fear that they'll be consumed with. And so what we know is, or at least this is the theory that we posit, is that because we know we inherently heal, we're systems that are developed to heal, and that when we observe hunter-gatherers who have evolved this way for millions of years, that when they go through horrible trauma, they're not burdened with that trauma in perpetuity. They don't have PTSD, they don't have anxiety disorders, they don't have depression. These are non-existent things in all hunter-gatherer bands that we've been studying now for hundreds of years, even the ones that are around today. And so why the difference? Well, it's complex, but ultimately today, we hang on to this idea of victim. And so we actually lock in that timeline, that 7-year-old timeline, and then we start to act in a way to compensate for our victim story. It becomes the justification for certain behaviors, whether that's substance, whether that's a behavioral reaction, whether that's fear-based beliefs, whatever that might be. Maybe I won't trust men for the rest of my life because of my trauma. And because I feel like a victim of that, what it becomes is the justification for my addiction, which then actually reinforces the victim. And then you create this victim addiction loop. Mm. And so just to finish up, we would go one step further and say the fast route to people overcoming almost any version of psychological dysfunction, and in many cases physical dysfunction, would, instead of to identify all their addictions and all their trauma-related behavior, instead identify their victim, identify their martyr, identify how it's incorporated itself into their persona, into their personality and their stories, draw a line in the sand and say, even though I was victimized, we've all been victimized. That's the nature of life. Pain is a part of life. But what's creating my suffering is that I'm not only recognizing that I've been victimized, I'm recognizing and holding on to the idea that I am a victim. And if we draw that line in the sand and say, I will no longer be a victim, even though I've been victimized, then you ask this question, and people in the beginning need to ask it 10, 20, 30 times a day, every time they catch themselves talking about self-limitation or some excuse where they're blaming somebody else for their circumstances, or where they feel powerless. They're caught up in the victim. And when they catch themselves in the victim, then they have to ask themselves, if I'm not a victim, because I'm never going to be a victim again, and if I'm not a victim, what am I? And so it's an interesting little exercise. And what seems to come up most regularly, Dusty, is people say, if I'm not a victim, then I'm free. Or if I'm not a victim, I'm empowered. Or if I'm not a victim, I can choose. If I'm not a victim, I'm the creator of my experience. And so what that question reveals at a deeper level is our authentic nature. Minus our victimology, we show up as who we really are. And then we create a different experience.
I guess the challenge is getting to that point. And if you've been in that loop, as you call it, for so long, it's got to be a huge, huge challenge to see, even see the line
Yeah.
and get to that point. And I guess that would is a good segue into actually asking you and getting maybe backtracking a bit and asking about your practice and asking about what it is that exactly that you do, because we kind of jumped in really heavy hard right off the hop, and I
Yeah,
never
yeah.
aside from the short introduction, I never really got to explain, and I wanted you to explain what it is you do, your practice. Uh, it was good to hear this right off the hop, and now I guess you could explain what it is you actually do.
Sure. Yeah. So almost 20 years ago, I started as an intake counselor at a treatment program. It was a transition point in my life, and we were changing directions. Got out of a business with my wife together, and I was always really intrigued. I was actually raised by a father who had a drinking problem. My mother and father broke up. He was also very physically abusive, and so I went through a lot of abuse and neglect and abandonment. My mother took my other four brothers, moved away, left me with my abusive father for 4 years, and then when my mother sent for me, the new man that she was married to also had an alcohol problem, and a worse one. He was
Wow.
less violent. There was no abuse, physical abuse, but then there was like this emotional disconnect
Right.
and all the things that kind of come with that. And so I was always on the other side of the overt, obvious addiction. I, in a sense, learned to kind of become codependent. I learned to kind of become an enabler. But I did learn a fair amount experientially about addiction. And so fast forward in my life, I guess, when the opportunity presented itself for me to actually work in the field, I felt like, oh my God, it's a home run for me. I get this stuff already.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got trained as an interventionist and an addiction specialist. And I didn't like my training. I thought it was rudimentary. I thought it was archaic. And, and so I actually developed my own model of intervention, which instead of based on coercion and shaming and pressure and ostracization, instead it focused on, first of all, understanding, bigger picture understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Then it focused on empathy. Then it focused on accountability and love, and then hope and optimism and motivation moving forward. And so I developed this whole formula that I thought would be better at motivating people into behavior and experiential changes. And so the model that I developed was extraordinarily successful and much more effective than the model that I was trained in. And so fast forward really quickly, I had a very powerful experience and a poignant moment in my life where I had this big epiphany, and then this informed my life. It's not like an epiphany that 3 days later you would forget. It was one of those peak experiences that it's hard to explain. It was almost a mystical or spiritual experience in a sense, and I was transformed by it, and that I also then knew what I needed to do with the rest of my life. And so I bumped into, I connected with a neuroscientist from Caltech, and he was so captivated by the seminal concepts that I presented to him, and it was fundamentally different than anything he had heard before. He did a couple months of research to see if this had been presented anywhere else and to see if it already had been kind of debunked. And it hadn't. In fact, the science in the last 5 years had already started veering towards what I was suggesting. And so we were kind of mavericks, and we came up with this concept, and we discovered a core mechanism of the brain, and we developed what we call a unified model of human behavior. We developed a psychoeducational model and a therapeutic model concurrently. And then we took it out into the field and started presenting it to people and did lectures at Caltech, UCLA, Jungian Institute, that kind of thing. And then also started doing it, working with families and using it therapeutically. And so flash forward, we had great success in working with every type of dysfunction. It initially was sort of geared more towards substance abuse and behavioral addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And then very quickly, people started asking us, well, do you think you can help my daughter? She's got a hoarding problem. Or do you think you can help my son? He has PTSD, or my daughter has OCD. And so we would start to apply it to everything in this mechanism in the brain. We already theoretically believed it would help with most forms of dysfunction, if not all, on some level. And everything that we applied it to, and it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, and I apologize for that, but it's just a fact. Everything we applied it to, it worked for. And so we knew we found something. We knew we had something really special. And then it became our passion, to share it with the world. Co-authored a couple books. I've written a couple more since then. And nothing ever really exploded. It never really took off. I mean, I worked with some bigger organizations. We worked with schools here in British Columbia. And there was a lot of people championing our process. And inevitably, one way or the other, it just didn't take off. And so here we are now, about 2 years ago, we introduced plant medicine. And the plant medicine has sort of become a vehicle because everyone's now seeing the research on psychedelic healing. And so it seems like my model is like the perfect fit for psychedelics. We understand what happens in the brain with psychedelics, and our model is used in a way to deepen that effect and to enhance the overall benefit of it. And so here we've been doing it for the last couple of years, and things are really getting busy. Things are really blowing up. I'm mostly based on the awareness around plant medicine and the excitement in the field. And where I'm right now in Vancouver, British Columbia, Vancouver City Council actually just unanimously approved to put on the docket the idea of decriminalizing all drugs from a harm reduction perspective in Vancouver. It's inevitable that it's going to happen here in Canada. Oregon, the entire state of Oregon, just legalized all drugs. Colorado has decriminalized at Washington, D.C., Oakland, California, Santa Cruz, or San Jose. Can't remember which one. But anyways, it's changing in the world right now. And it seems like all of the scientific data coming out, empirically reinforced by multiple institutions, is saying that we've got a panacea. We've got a curative source for healing so many modern day disorders. So it's like the most exciting time to be in my field, but just for anyone who needs hope, people that are on the brink of suicide or giving up or so depressed or whatever, there's such incredible hope that is coming. We can talk more about that if you want.
Yeah, no, most definitely. We're right. I guess right now we'll stick on topic regarding your practice and more so about the plant medicine, and we'll dive over to addiction, and which I really wanted to ask you about later. But right now with the plant medicine, it was interesting that I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. He talks about a diverse topic range, very, very diverse. And this one here I was listening to, he was talking with two gentlemen. One was, I think his name was Murarescu, Brian Murarescu, and he wrote The Immortality Key, The Secret History of the Religion with No Name. And the book, way out of my league, but as I listened, it became very, very interesting to me. And they went down all different kinds of rabbit holes, but one was about spiked wine back in ancient times, and going way back, even before Christ, and before there was alcohol, and the use of psychedelics in religion. And then it went down all kinds of different paths, and then it went into mushrooms and what's that one, Amanita muscaria,
Right.
is that, yeah, and he talked about that, and it just went everywhere. And as I'm listening, I'm like, holy shit, I got to ask Todd if he would come on and talk. Like, obviously Joe Rogan, his mental capacity and his intelligence is way beyond me, but I do find it very interesting, and the how science is taking. I want to actually say going back, because it was introduced a while ago and then totally shut
Sure.
down by that gentleman that
Yeah.
that Rogan had on the show. His career kind of just got tanked, and I can't remember that gentleman's name, but now it's coming back
Yeah.
around.
Could it be Timothy Leary?
Maybe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just, I just find that this all very interesting. And there's all kinds of people that still think drugs are drugs,
That's right.
and I understand that. I'm just putting this out there for people to be more informed. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody can make their own judgments, but I just found it very interesting, and that's why I wanted to ask you some of this stuff.
Yeah, Dusty. I mean, it's such a good question. Listen, in fairness to you and a lot of people that think drugs are drugs, I was one of those guys. I was raised an athlete. And, I played sports my whole life. And your body was a temple. And you didn't put crap in your body. Now, not that some athletes didn't put crap in their body, they did. But some didn't. Some really saw their body as a temple. And I was that guy. And I got to tell you, my programming was, and I kind of, in retrospect, I'm a little embarrassed to say this based on what I do now, but my programming was, period. If you did drugs, you were a loser. And, I was a kid when I thought that, but that was my programming. And, that it's very endemic. It gets deeply programmed into the psyche. And so, it took me, I never really did any hard drugs. I tried pot a few times and I didn't drink much. So, what could I say to these people that have had these problems? And other than that, I was the sort of recipient, I was the codependent, I was the other side of seeing alcohol abuse.
Right.
And so what could I know? That had greatly influenced me. Of course, I was turned off of alcohol because of what I saw growing up.
Right.
But I guess, somewhere around the age of 35, and I'm 57 now, so I guess about 22 years ago, I started researching and started changing my mind. And then I even tried a few different drugs, sort of more experimental. I felt like I'm in a great relationship. I'm a very happy person. I'm not trying these drugs to change my life or to help me heal or to avoid pain. And I think that's really important. And so I wasn't prone in any way to addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, over the next 22 years, I mean, in one way or another, but I do want to implore them, your old belief systems here might be holding you back and keeping you stuck in a place that might be just way more painful. These, what I can say comfortably, the substances that have been identified as psychedelic in nature seem to have a profoundly different effect than other illicit drugs. But if I'm just being an honest person, I then have to say that even though I think there's some drugs that inherently can pull us away from who we are, can pull us away from truth, that even those done and used with intention, with a real awareness, even those drugs can actually still teach us something and be productive. But certainly psychedelics, what they do, something inherent in the property of psychedelics, and it's too complex. I mean, science doesn't even really understand what these psychedelics can elicit in us and provide for us, but they seem to connect us to a deeper source of truth, a deeper sense of wisdom. And there's this sort of realignment that happens with psychedelics. And so if I was going to simplify mental and emotional health, and this might feel like a gross simplification, but I could spend hours breaking it down and defending it. But what I would say is that directly to the degree that a person has the ability and the commitment to experience truth, and then also the commitment to tell truth, will be directly proportional to their overall health and happiness. And that's a bombastic statement, but that's what I see. And so then anything that I use that might be able to bring me closer to truth then actually starts to heal me. And anything that pulls me away from truth can start to hurt me. But then people ask the question, well, are you talking subjective truth or universal truth? And I am talking more of these universal truths. I'm not just talking about your opinions or how you were programmed by your culture or your religion, but there are universal truths. And there's most importantly, the truth of who and what I am. And so things that bring me closer to that heal me, and things that take me further from that hurt me.
They say that when you use psychedelics, it in some form brings you closer to God, or spiritually, whatever form of spiritual belief you have, it seems to bring you closer. I've never had the experience. I also, my daughter has been to ayahuasca and taken that stuff a few times, I think, and has come out knowing things or having these, I don't want to say epiphanies, but just clarities that just kind of got brought to the forefront that she had been suppressing for a long time. And she's a big believer in that. It's tough. I'm an open person, and I'm willing to listen to anything as long as the person can explain themselves and
Right.
and I don't want to to defend their argument. Just an open conversation. If we're both like-minded that way, usually I can get to the bottom of what I want to know. But I find there's a lot of questions that a lot of people have, but aren't as open to actually listening to it. So that's why I'm happy to have you on here and explain some of this. It's very difficult, though, I'm sure, in the amount of time we have, because we've had a few conversations. You've explained some things really well to me. It's a definite. It's definitely something that people that, after listening to this, should do their own research. That's the biggest thing, and that goes with anything, Todd. Not just this topic, but what we're dealing with now in the United States and the media and whatnot. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole at all politically, but just point being, doing your own research and about this in particular, about plant medicine and psychedelics and some of the benefits that are coming out and being proven too in a lot of ways. But you have to research that to find it, because it's not out there in the main media. You have to go looking for it. I tried before doing this with you. It's difficult, actually. The first things that come up are kind of disputing when you just do your basic searches. But then if you keep looking, you find more and more proof that this stuff is working for people. I find it fascinating, actually.
Yeah, you're right, Dusty. I mean, a lot of people haven't learned to be good researchers, and they typically will just sort of search for something that will reinforce the existing narrative that they already have. But yeah, I mean, if you objectively are searching for truth and you really want to know the truth instead of just supporting your narrative, then you're going to come to truth. Now, the beauty of the plant medicine renaissance or resurgence right now is that there's the overwhelming evidence is certainly leaning towards objectively the positive use and the positive outcomes related to plant medicine. And so these aren't fringe groups that are, it's not like a bunch of hippies in the 60s that are playing around.
Right.
I mean, even though the hippies are still doing it, don't get me wrong. And I love the hippies, and I'm close friends with some of these hippies, and they sometimes bring their substance over. That being said, the 60s 50s and 60s, psychedelics and plant medicine was really being explored, and things were opening up, and there was good science behind it. There were a lot of studies and research being done. And without, again, the politics, for whatever reason, Timothy Leary did the old thing about dropping out or tuning out or whatever it is and screw the man. Well, that scared the man. And so he turned it into a class 1 drug. And the last thing the man wants is everybody thinking freely and independently. I mean, how are we supposed to turn our little Autobots into the tax machines that they're supposed to be? Right. And, just following the orders and so on and so forth. But so right now you get to go to these credible institutions, and you can, at the top of the list, I would say, is Johns Hopkins. Right. And you can take a look at all of the studies at Johns Hopkins. I mean, there's a resounding, reinforcing outcome, which is all of the studies are producing positive results. They're not having a single study suggesting that there's a negative related to the proper application of plant medicine, specifically in this case, psychedelics. And so the plant medicines that they're working with would range from, or the psychedelics that they're working with, would range from psilocybin to DMT to LSD, MDMA, ketamine, and I don't know that they're doing any work with ayahuasca or ibogaine, but a lot of people are doing research on those as well. But then there's other institutions like NYU and McGill and universities and incredible learning institutions all around the world now are getting grants and doing this research. So it's been over 15 years that these top-notch universities have been delving into this area, and it's now hundreds and hundreds of studies. And so whether people know about it or not is a little bit secondary, because we need to share that information with people because the results are in. Right. And the beautiful thing is, Dusty, it seems like now, from my model's perspective, what we understand about the brain, we're going to surmise that literally almost every form of psychosis, every form of dysfunction, I shouldn't take that back. Psychosis is not what I meant. Psychopathology. Every form of pathology, mental illness, other than schizophrenia or psychosis, and many forms of not just mental illness, but like chronic pain. Even chronic pain, they're starting to see really positive results. And so it seems like almost everything they apply it to, it has a very positive outcome. It's important, though, that we do talk about schizophrenia and psychosis, because even though I believe a person who's struggling with schizophrenia and psychosis still has hope and still can work with plant medicine and still can work with psychedelics, it's not something that they should do, certainly not on their own, because there is evidence that psychedelics can actually increase or enhance arbitrary random events of psychosis for somebody that already has a propensity for it. And then that can end up being potentially dangerous. If they don't know how to interpret their hallucinations, if they don't know how to, and this is going to sound crazy, but they don't know how to learn from and take advantage of their hallucinations, then it can actually end up being dangerous. But almost everything else that it's applied to, it's working for.
That's incredible. Sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
And say working for, I don't mean just helping a little bit. The term they use with psychedelics is curative. The term we use with other medicines is medicinal. Right. Curative means that we're seeing people do 1, 2, 3 therapeutic interventions or ceremonies and healing a 25-year depression, or healing a 25-year drug addiction, or overcoming an anxiety disorder or PTSD, like gone, healed, and then follow up a year or two later and still doing well, thriving. And so the efficacy related to your measurement metrics, whatever you're using for efficacy to determine that, is up around 70% for most of the things they're using it on, versus traditional therapies and medicines, which might be around the 30, 35%. So, and you're not dependent on them for the rest of your life. It's like 70%, and then maybe you're done, maybe you're healed. And that, so that the preliminary results related to these new things that they're trying for are also very positive. So it's just exciting. It's so exciting to be involved in this.
I guess this is a good segue into the actual topic of addiction. I'd like to, obviously, when I introduced the show, as I was reading it, I just wrote it real quick, and as I was reading it, sounded very connective, like I was sharing that I was an addict. Uh, and that's how I knew you. Just the way it came off.
Right.
We do have a connection. That wasn't myself personally, that it was taking the plant medicine to cure an addiction. However, I do have plenty of history and stories around addiction and alcoholism and things like that. My grandfather was an alcoholic, and it's weird because you kind of just live through it and don't even really realize it when you're a child, but you look
Right.
back at things and it starts to make a difference when you think about and how it changed you or changed your mother or things like that. But I do have a history with alcohol. I was a junior hockey player from 15. I started real young, and I played the old saying, I played hard and partied harder all through my career till I retired from being a professional hockey player at 37, I think I was. And it was weird because I never drank at meals, just for have a beer. It was like it was the party, the atmosphere. It was like go hard or go home. But I remember after retiring, I think it was a surprise birthday party right after I'd retired back, and we were here in Vancouver, and wife had a surprise party for me, and I ran my head into a wall and ended up in the hospital, and woke up in the hospital. Actually, don't remember it, and that was the last time. Not the last time I ever drank, but it was the last time I partied, and I'd have a beer here and there. But it wasn't like I quit that day. But and that was 15 years ago or whatever. But it's been for sure 10 years that I don't drink anymore at all. And but it was weird because I talked to some people, and this is where we go into the topic of genetics or learned thinking. I was able to do that, and still, like, it's not like I love a good crown and ginger. I used to love whiskey and stuff, and even I'll be in the airport lounge and I'll look at the bottles and go, wow, that'd be nice to have them, but I don't, and I'm okay with that. But some people aren't, and this topic and your connection with it and your teachings, I find it fascinating, and I just wanted to share my brief story first, that I'm not just asking and I don't know what's going on. I have a connection with it, but I also have people in my life that aren't able, or in their eyes aren't able to control it like I did. And I want your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a controversial topic. There is and it's culturally endemic, and that is fundamentally that addiction is a disease, and it's an incurable disease, and there seems to be evidence. I mean, if you observe it, I mean, depending on your metrics for what you define disease as, you could probably find ways to support that, and people do. And I think that with the very best intentions, it's kind of heartbreaking, but with the very best intentions, it is fundamentally this belief system that actually perpetuates the dysfunction. It's not only this belief system, it is our individual and collective belief systems that seem to create the vast majority of our behavior, that lead to the vast majority of our experience. And so I can give you a variety of different examples to provide evidence for why we should change this concept of addiction being an incurable disease. There's so many reasons why. For one, it becomes the best excuse for unconsciously or consciously choosing to indulge, because you have the best justification. I have an incurable disease. I have no control over this. And so how do you expect me to stop? The prevailing wisdom is I have no control. What do you mean? And so also don't beat me up because I have a disease. Also don't judge me because I have a disease. And so it's so counterproductive. Even again, if we talk about the ideology that's being promulgated, if I even said I agree with 80% of it, mm-hmm. that 20% that I don't agree with, the evidence is so clearly destructive that 20% outweighs the 80% that I think is wonderful and good and well-intended. And so what I can say is, in the 20 years that I've been doing this, so that we don't bore people talking about brain science, we have to distill it down and create a language that in lay terms everyone can understand, because we have to be relatable. And so you come up with these concepts that you've heard before that can kind of support this, but then also call into question and challenge that predominant modality of this incurable disease. And so I'll present this to you. In biblical terms, there's this saying, the truth will set you free. And okay, so what does that mean? That's a pretty abstract concept, the truth will set you free. I think a lot of people will have had some experiences where they were lost in duplicity or lying or hiding or secrets, and felt the imprisonment of that. And so on a surface level, the truth will set you free is like, oh God, I got that lie off my back and now I can tell the truth, and that feels that much cleaner. Yeah. But we would take it so far as to say, and this is a really bold claim, and we don't have the hours to support it, so I'm just going to say it and I'm going to let it dangle, and people can either choke on it or they can shoot and enjoy it, and that's up to them, I guess. But that we would take it one step further and say that if a person actually has an intense veracity, a commitment for telling truth, but then also in conjunction with their commitment to telling truth, that they actually have the ability to tell the truth, where the cognitive mind, the processing, the thinking version of me, and the emotional version of me, and the sensory version of me all tell the same truth, to the degree that that's aligned with truth, will be directly proportional to my level of dysfunction, pain, and suffering in my life. So what we're saying is that any dysfunction can be healed if that person can acquire the commitment and the ability to tell the truth. And so we could take that. Now, again, I know this sounds bizarre, but I've worked with schizophrenia, I've worked with psychosis, I've worked with all of these things, and all of them fundamentally have physiological changes in the brain that limit that person's ability to tell the truth. It's ability to tell the truth. They might be committed to the truth, but their ability has been subverted, hijacked, sabotaged in one way or another. And so if I can give that person a framework, if I can give that person a tool in some way that improves their ability to tell the truth, they'll get a little bit better. And they'll actually feel it, and they'll see it, and they'll be able to attribute it to the tool that allowed them to tell the truth. And then they get more committed to the process of truth and more committed to sort of the other processes that allow them to discover the way to take control of their brain and physiology, where their ability to tell the truth also improves. And as that belief system and that motivation and that faith kind of spirals upward, so there'll be a direct correlation with their overall well-being. That sounds too good to be true, but it in fact is true. So if you're dealing with a schizophrenic, well, what do you come up with? You've got to help that person realize that the little green men around them are illusory, that they are part of a hallucination. And maybe it's not something so obvious as little green men. Maybe it's their best friend. Maybe it's a little girl with black hair and red eyes. Maybe it's that it rains inside your house, but it rains fire. So there'll be certain things that our rational brain will help us overcome, and then certain things that seem believable enough that it's more challenging. But without going through all the examples of the people that I've worked with over the years, what we can do with plant medicine and other therapeutic processes is actually reboot the brain in a way where not only does the experience of the plant medicine help you tell truth, but the introduction of processes and tools and a way of perceiving things will also help you tell truth. And then to the degree that you can, you instantly, if you could tell 100% truth, you could instantly overcome your eating disorder, your anorexia, your schizophrenia, your alcohol disorder, your gambling problem, your conflict with your wife, your borderline personality, you name it. Your ability to tell the truth and your commitment to that sooner or later will actually rebalance the brain chemistry. And then as that brain and body chemistry rebalances, it just gets easier and easier to tell the truth. So the truth will set you free.
Through all of what you just explained, it's funny because you used the word layman's terms. For dumb people like me is basically what you're saying. I can't explain it all, but when I've talked to you in the past, it made sense to me. The connection of the plant medicine, I can't speak for that personally, so I can't really give my opinion. But as far as truths and that connection of opening up to moving forward or whatever direction you want to go but can't, that part makes 100% sense to me. And our fields are so different, but as far as helping people and my developing players, goalies, and getting them to open up, let their guard down. And when you just said truths, like everyone's got views of themselves and it's ingrained in them and they're very defensive about it. And I don't have a degree in getting people to open up and let their guards down, but that's exactly the way I go about coaching. It's a huge, you call it a model, and you actually have a model. Mine just started developed, but it was all based around that and getting them to have trust in me and faith in me and what I'm saying. But it's when you can recognize, and I've seen it happen with the players, when they have let that guard down and they're open to the truth, the improvement is unchallenged at that point. The sky's the limit, if you will. And it just seems very interesting to me in your model about that and the truth. And I hope someone can hear this and get something out of this, even if they don't use plant medicine, just that simple helpful tool can be huge, I think, for somebody. I hope some of this gets to some people right now, because like I said earlier, I wrote this down, just about the importance of the crossover and the connection of what your profession is and what is going on right now in the world, to me, is very important. I know a lot of people are having a very tough time with this, and subsequently, or that maybe weren't addicted before to something, whether it be alcohol, drugs, and then the depression and suicide rates. I just really wanted to get this out there, and to people, and maybe get to someone like you, or maybe not you in particular, but wherever you are in the world that can get help. I just find this connection and crossover very important to me.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's so interesting that you use the analogy of working with goaltenders in professional hockey. And it seems counterintuitive that what you're actually doing to help them become a better goalie is get them to drop their guard.
I never quite looked at it that way.
It's almost like working with boxers. As soon as I can get you to drop your guard, where normally I would tell you, well, that left you wide open. Now you're going to get slugged in the head. But now your boxing's going to get really good. But I mean, I totally understand what you mean. There is a qualifier that we want to say, again, just for safety first. And this isn't because I want people sent to me or people coming to me. I'm already way too busy. But that being said, all the empirical data suggests that doing plant medicine in a therapeutic, safe, healthy environment, where setting and dosage and a lot of other variables are incorporated into the process is so critically important. Now, there'll be people out there that will argue with that. There will be people that will tell you, no, pop down on your couch, lie down on your couch or your bed, and go ahead and take a mega dose and go on your journey, and it'll be transformative for you. All you got to do is set an intention and then trust the medicine, and boom. Well, that happens. First of all, there's a lot of inherent risk, because we don't want people playing around with plant medicine. This is very powerful medicine. Doing it on your own, even though it could be transformative, also could make you feel like maybe I can fly and that I'm just going to jump out the third-story window.
Yeah.
And the last thing we want is one person getting injured, because, even though big pharma and their medication might kill millions of people around the world a year, we're used to that now. And somehow that's not a news story. I'm not suggesting that anyone go home and take 5 or 6 ounces or 5 or 6 grams of mushrooms. What I'm saying is that there are groups out there, and those groups you can probably find, but there are groups, and if you need to find a group, you just look me up online and I'll point you in the right direction. But there are groups out there that are helping people already. There are therapists out there that are risking their license to help people already. And there are provisions being put in place and dispensations being created that allow people under certain circumstances to work with this plant medicine now. So we're so darn close, but I just want to advise against, doing this on your own. All the empirical data suggests that the higher efficacy is done in conjunction with a therapeutic support.
Interesting. No, that's a good thing to mention for sure, because I do know people that use recreationally, and I know of people that have had some bad things happen on their own. But having said that, like you said, if you use things without guidance or direction, anything can happen. I don't care what it is. Taking perks on your own without any kind of medicine. I've seen it go sideways depending on the person, and like we talked about with types of individuals.
That's right.
I could take Percocet when I had my surgeries, and it felt great. But once it was done, it was done. I was, and I never really felt that connection. Probably a bad word to use regarding that, but some people, they grip to it, and this is your field, but it's a good message to send out there, because we don't know which ones, some person might do this on their own and without guidance, and might go the wrong way for sure. I appreciate that message.
Safety first. I mean,
whoops, sorry, you broke up there.
Dusty, I cut you off there. Yeah, I was just saying safety first, right? I mean, even though we're stepping into this new realm, this new area, it's not new. They've been around for millions of years. Mushrooms were here before people were. They're just a phenomenal plant. But as we're endeavoring to step into a new realm of therapies, we want to step gently and respectfully and honor these medicines, and they really are medicines. So, let's temper our excitement and make sure that we take the necessary steps so that we can actually have a positive outcome instead of potentially a negative one. That being said, the medicine itself, it's probably the safest drug on the planet. I would say even safer than aspirin. It's not necessarily safe if there's not somebody there to guide you.
Right.
Because you might get up and walk around and fall down, trip and hurt yourself. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen. But the psilocybin, that's not going to hurt you.
Like
I say
the
that
actual what is in your body.
Right.
It's what can
Right.
happen from it.
That's right.
If you're not guided. Yeah, no,
That's right.
That's good to know actually for people that don't know. Like, is you put something in your body, like for example, meth or heroin, like people know now that stuff when it goes in you, it's doing damage in you, not just mentally, it's doing damage inside of your body. And it's kind of funny that we talk about this, that what alcohol, for example, it's as legal as can be and accepted in the public as can be, but that stuff in your body is slowly but surely doing damage inside of you, and
Yeah.
not just what can happen when you take it, but that's good information to know about, that the actual consumption, that part, as far as what you're explaining, isn't harmful.
No. The substance itself is, for the vast majority of the population, is perfectly safe. Now, you want to make sure that you're not picking the wrong mushrooms. Again, I wouldn't recommend you going out and picking your own magic mushrooms.
Right.
Not that I'm a super cautious person by nature, but when you're starting to share this with people and you want it to be a part of a renaissance or a movement where people are healing from it, you put those precautions in place. And so there are mushrooms out there that can look a little bit too close to different types of magic mushrooms, and they could be deadly. And so, right, you definitely want reliable sources, and you want to be responsible and mature. This isn't, for me, look, this isn't about partying. This isn't about recreational drugs. It's all about healing. And so when we do that, first do no harm, and then do it as responsibly as you can. And then you get the benefits, which, that's the magical part of this. But, we don't want to do anything that sort of ends up really damaging the movement.
Wow. It's crazy. I was looking at the time here. We're already over an hour, and I could talk about this stuff all day long because I find it really, really fascinating. And I never did ask you, when I mentioned that book by that gentleman, Brian Muraresku, have you ever heard of it?
No, I don't know.
It's an interesting read. It's out there, but the Immortality Key, and he actually went, I think he was over in Europe for a year, and he was in the Vatican, down in the basement. They're doing research, and they had, I don't know the word, but people testing chalices for the residues in the inside, that nobody had ever been allowed to do, and what was in these chalices, and they're finding these types of things.
It makes sense, though.
Well, yeah, I just find it, if it's scary, because we talk about what people's minds are like, and researching, and they just simply want to click a button, read something, and be done, or they don't want to know, because it changes direction, and some of this is out there and can really, really put a knock on some other things that are traditionally set in stone, if you will.
That's right.
But it's a very interesting read, and it goes into all kinds of beer, and how beer was different back in the day. It was not that recreational drink, and the wines and the mushrooms and the psychedelics. It was just a really interesting read, and having you on here talking about all of that, and then the addiction practice is just really important to me. I appreciate you, Todd, for coming on. I, this one has been a much different than the past, my first two pods, and I wanted to ask you. It just seems so heavy that I was going to ask all my guests a few questions. It seems like kind of, I don't know. I'm going to ask them anyways, if you don't mind.
Oh, please.
The first one was your favorite band, because we never even got into music at all, which I'm a huge fan of. But and this probably throws you off. You're probably, I wasn't prepared for this.
Oh, I'm ready.
Do you have a favorite band, Todd?
Favorite band, I'm just going to say that, of course, you know, all of us have like probably several favorite bands at different stages in our life, right?
For sure.
I remember in the early 2000s, I was madly in love with Coldplay.
Right.
And I know now some people mock Coldplay, and I don't get it. I just think they're so talented and so good. I don't like it when, you know, like people make fun of Nickelback, right? And not that I was ever a huge fan of Nickelback, but it's like the pop culture turns on some of these bands, and then they start making fun of them. But I think if I had to listen to one source of music from an individual or a band for the rest of my life, I'm going to look for somebody that's prolific, you know, somebody that's really got a diverse body of music, but a large enough body. Sure. And I guess if I had to pick one, I would probably pick Elton John. Good you know, stuff. But going back to the 70s more, you know, where him and Bernie Taupin, I mean, they just created such remarkable music. It's also hard just because of the incredible amount of content that they have, and so much of it is good, even though some of it I don't love. But if I could take a band that I would break up, and I could not only take the music from that band, but then also from the individuals once they broke up from the band, right, then it'd be hard not to take the Beatles.
Yeah, for sure.
It would also be hard not to take Genesis, because you'd have Phil Collins, Mike and the Mechanics, and Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
And so,
of course, I leave it to you, because you're obviously very intelligent to break it up this way. I've never heard that way of breaking up a band and where they went and they created more music, almost like branches, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting take on that. And that kind of answers my second question. It's like your favorite genre. But so I already know now, listening to what you just said, Elton John is a huge one for me too. He's obviously his newer, as he's gotten older and he can't sing the same anymore. I still have mad respect for the guy, but I don't like it anymore. Yeah. But his greatest hits, it's masterful stuff. And the last one right now, if you just looked on your iTunes or whatever you use for listening music, what do you have right now? What do you
wow. Okay. So the people I'm in love with right now, you probably won't have heard of this guy, but you got to look him up.
Okay.
He's unbelievable. His name is Emmett Fenn. Emmett Fenn. Fenn.
Write that down.
Yeah, unbelievable. I don't even know how to describe the style of music. It's like it's a little bit electronic in a sense, but also mellow. But it's just so creative. But then there's a genius in my mind, a genius that has come out musically lately. She's a young girl. And normally I would shy away, like, come on, who wants to listen to that kind of bubblegum music?
Right.
Her name is Billie Eilish.
Oh, yeah.
And man, just what a talent.
My wife hates her, but it's funny because I'm a rocker, by heart and my history. But I also recognize talented people. And I recognize that in her right away, and I downloaded quite a bit of her stuff just because she has a real interesting take on her writing and choice of sounds and how she sings. How
Yeah.
It's very different. Like at first you're like, oh, that's a wimpy voice, but the more you listen,
Right.
she's got some talent for sure. No,
I've got a
I follow
question for
you.
you.
What?
Well, there's a Canadian contingent of really top-notch Canadian musicians right now. I mean, we've always had some good musicians up
Right.
here, but sort of, poppy and hip hop music. And so
Yeah.
we've got four of the most popular artists in the world right now. Do you know the four that I'm talking about? Really, at the top of the list.
Drake.
Drake, yeah. Okay. Who else?
And this is tough because I don't like that stuff at all. Bieber.
Bieber, yeah.
So I don't even like using those words. Don't normally come out of my mouth. Mind you, Biebs does play hockey, so I got to cut him some slack.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
There you go.
I'm trying to. No, let me think. Top. Another Canadian. Those are the only two that come to my mind.
There's a bunch, but you've heard of Shawn Mendes.
He's Canadian?
He's Canadian.
Come on. No, I've heard of Shawn Mendes.
And also The Weeknd is Canadian. The Weeknd.
It's funny. My kids are all followed my suit as far as being rockers and whatnot. The three boys went to The Weeknd, and I was like, "What are you doing?" But they said,
"How dare you?"
They would never. I never admit it in public, but they said it was an unreal show.
Yeah, man. I actually love all four of those guys. I really do. I think they're all super talented. I think Drake is a prolific writer. I mean, the guy just song after song, album after album, and a lot of it's good. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it's good. And Bieber, as much as people might want to tease him, he's talented. Yeah. He's talented. He's a good artist. I mean, again, Weeknd, same thing. And then Shawn Mendes is on top of the world right now, and there's a bunch more too, but yeah, so I like all of them. So who's your favorite rocker band of all time?
It's a tough one to say all time because I have so much music in my library.
Okay, wait. You're on a stranded island.
AC/DC.
And what's that?
AC/DC.
AC/DC.
And you're on a stranded island, and I can only listen to yeah. Oh, geez. But I get to listen to all of their library.
All of it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because if you pick something mellow, you're going to probably get depressed and die on that island. So I'm going to rock out.
Rock it up a little.
Yeah. AC/DC. I there's so many. I love, Van Halen, the older Van, with
Dave
Roth. I'm a huge Van Halen fan, but and the funny thing is a lot of people, I love some Stones, but I'm not there's a lot of stuff of theirs that I don't like because they have so much. Yeah. But AC/DC, it's funny because I did a bonus pod that I'm going to release right after recording this on Friday, and it's just a shorter version. It's just me talking, and it talks about music and me growing up and how it changes you and shapes you. And I just mentioned at the end some bands I'm listening to now that I'm hooked on, and like kind of what you were talking about. And then the next episode I'm going to do, it's going to be more introducing some newer bands. And I also said that, and if you know anybody, Todd, locally, I said that I outro with I'm with music and intro with me. The intro music is me playing right now, and then the outro stuff I did. The first two episodes I outroed with my youngest son Mac, and Mac, a couple of his songs that he wrote and sung, and so I put those out there. But the goal is I can only put my son's songs on there so many times, is to uh, ask the people to send me their music, and indie bands that are
Okay.
copywritten and want their stuff to get out there. And if I like it, I'd love to put it on. So if you know anybody locally, I definitely wanted to do that. That's a kind of a goal of mine. This one, our conversation was a lot deeper, but in general, it's more so stuff that just interests me and stuff I
Right.
like talking about. But if you know anyone,
A couple more questions for you. As a
yeah.
music aficionado, and you play music, so now you're talking about your intro and outro. Um, your favorite guitar player of all time?
That's going to be in an episode. Hang on one second. I wrote some down. Hang on, give me.
Maybe don't spoil it then. Don't spoil it.
I won't name them all, but I want to think of who I wrote down here. Yeah, it's tough. I love Stevie Ray Vaughan. God rest his
Yeah.
soul. I was a big Stevie Ray Vaughan fan. Eddie for sure. God rest his soul. And I
Yeah.
love Eddie
Yeah.
for a couple of reasons, because, and people that didn't grow up with that wouldn't know, but he changed music. Not a lot of people can say
Yeah.
that. He changed
Yeah.
his instrument, and that
Yes.
and
Yes.
that there's so many great guitarists out there right now. So many, it's crazy. It's like sports. People are just better and faster,
Yeah.
and
Right.
people are just unreal now. But not many can say they changed their instrument, the progress of their instrument, and he definitely did. And I
Right.
grew up with that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, there was Hendrix and
I
then
was
Van
just gonna.
Halen
I got Hendrix,
that
Jimmy.
made the.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many great guitarists right now, but uh, and even guys like Jimmy Page and from Zeppelin and stuff, the great, awesome guitarists. Um, but there's only a select few that actually did some things that nobody had done and changed the direction. Can you imagine when like guy like Chuck Berry or somebody early on, they're playing guitar and they just decide to crank their album that doesn't have any pedals or effects on it, and just crank it so it actually is all distorted and sounds like, and people are probably going, what the hell is he doing? And then that turns into distortion and rock and roll, and it just gets heavier
Yeah.
and heavier. You know what I mean? People like
Yeah.
that change music, I find very fascinating. But yeah, Stevie Ray Vaughan might be up there at the top for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So I'm so curious. Do you feel like rock and roll is still alive, or is rock and roll dead?
Great question. But um, I think it has a tough hole that had been dug for them, and I don't know who dug it, but it's been years, and the rockers will always be there and loving them, but as far as like industry wise and financially and where the money's going, uh, I think it's come back a little bit, but just compared to what is out there right now, it's
Hmm.
but I guess it's not a race. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like who's winning. I think there's some awesome rock and roll music out there, but if you look at Billboard and where the money's being spent and the kids nowadays, where the downloads are coming from, uh, it's tough to compete with hip hop, um, and the R&B, that movement of what is, the Bill, even like the Billie Eilish's and this stuff that is out there is obviously, that's not rock. And
Right.
there's still stuff being sold and doing well. The tours in rock still are doing well. Right now nobody's touring, but when touring was happening, they still do well. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tough hole that kind of got dug for the rock world. It's weird. It's been years. It's been years that they've kind of
Yeah.
have to just live in their niche almost. That's just my opinion. I don't know if you agree.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The touring seems to still be mostly the old popular rock bands. Like,
Yeah,
you know, all the 75-year-olds are still on tour
yeah, oh
and
yeah,
doing a great job. When you
yeah,
speak of the Rolling Stones or whatever, it's
yeah,
put on a great show.
yeah. Well, and
And
you know,
AC/DC puts on a
some
great show.
some of the biggest tours, money making wise, tour wise, are rock and roll, like U2, AC/DC. These bands still
Yeah.
generate huge revenues in their touring, but record sales, well, you can't even call that anymore. It's so weird how things are now. Like it's
Right. What's a
down,
record? What is a
down,
record?
downloads,
Yeah.
and you buy iTunes, rent, you pay for that monthly subscription, so you don't pay for an album. So it's contracts that they're getting through iTunes, I guess. But no, they don't make their money that way anymore. They make their money from
No,
merchandise, from sales, in
that's
in
right.
in these areas and touring. It's a weird industry. I
I
don't
got, I,
understand it.
yeah, it is. I'm sorry you're leading me down this vortex, and I'm so interested now. I've got another question for you.
Okay,
What is the last album
sorry, say
that
that
you
again. You just
heard
broke up.
on a record player? What is the last album that you heard on a record player? The last album that you listened to?
Okay, well, that question doesn't work now for me because I bought a new turntable and
Oh, okay.
I brought them all out. And I actually just went, I have a place here in Surrey, White Rock area called Red Rum Records, and they have all kinds of old albums. Like you can go to stores and buy new ones pressed, but this has people, they've brought in, you trades, and you can go through these, sift through these albums for $1, $5. And I bought, like Bob Seger, David Bowie, Rod Stewart. What do we got? I bought an old Van Halen album that I can't find. Yeah, so um, the last one I listened to today was the Ziggy Stardust one.
Oh, wow. Bowie.
Uh, yeah, and it's old, like it's 4,
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
somewhere around there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
it's
Wow.
I love listening to the presses and the albums. The sound is just it for me. It brings back memories of my childhood, and
Yeah.
it's a good feeling. So
Yeah.
not only the music, but just the putting the album on, putting
Yeah.
the needle on the album. I think that just it brings back some great memories for me and makes me feel good in the shitty 2020.
Yeah, right.
No doubt.
Did you ever go through that stage? Did you ever go through that stage where, of course, we went from albums, and then I think, there was this battle between CDs, and then I don't know if you ever heard, but there was this stage for a while, maybe it only lasted a couple of years, where they were already doing MP3s, but they also had these things called mini discs. Did you ever see the mini discs?
My stereo uh, is a Bose stereo, but I bought it in Japan when I played there. Uh, and in Japan, um, mini discs went way, 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 way bigger. It never ever took off here, but it was huge in Japan. And I have
Oh, okay.
still probably 100 mini discs that work in that stereo
Wow.
that I have in my office. So yes, I remember that. Like I was such a music fan from an early age that I had them all, like what I could afford anyways. I had albums, I had 8 tracks, then I had tons of tapes. I remember in junior when I would drive away to whatever city that I was playing in Lethbridge or whatever, I'd drive my Ford Tempo and I would have in my back seat 5 cases of tapes on ready on play on my 15-hour drive to Lethbridge. And yeah, did the tapes. And then because we didn't have a ton of money growing up, so I was in switching from tapes. Everybody was moving to CDs, and I was hell bent on not changing because I couldn't afford it. So I kept tapes as long as I could. And it wasn't until I turned pro actually that I actually finally bought my first Discman. So that would have been 91. So I was late. Like there were CDs out, but I was still a tape guy, and I didn't switch over. And then now, so you get all these CDs, and now you don't even need anything anymore. You just play it on
That's
your
right.
phone.
Yeah,
It's
anything.
kind of sad in a way, because when I have these albums, you open them up and you have the in sleeve and you read the lyrics, look at the pictures of your favorite artists and bands, and all that's gone, man.
It's just like a good book. I mean, most of that's gone too.
100%. Well, I'm not going
Yeah.
to lie. When I talked about that book, I asked if you'd read that in the Immortality Key. I bought it on audio on
Yeah.
audiobook. So I'm just
Yeah.
lazy man's way of reading, listening
Yeah.
to it. But
Yeah, absolutely. I had a buddy that I went to high school with. His name was Wendell. And he had, man, that dude was in love with music. And, you know, all kinds of music, but he really loved funk and hip hop and rap. And he had the cassettes too, like boxes and boxes of cassettes. But he'd make cassettes. He'd spend time,
oh yeah,
you know, picking his favorite songs and making mixed tapes and then bringing them to school and sharing those tapes. I'll never forget that. And then I actually, when I was a young kid, I tried to have a production company, an entertainment company for a little bit. And I invited him to be my DJ. And so his nickname was DJ Babaloo. And we were and we were doing like reggae on the river and the Harper Mountain Ski Bash and things like that. It was such a fun time. But yeah, so my old buddy was my DJ, and I'll never forget all the cassette tapes that he had.
I totally remember, and I remember doing that. And people that most people wouldn't even know what tapes are. Yeah, the younger folk, but how hard it was, how time-taking it was. It was, you would have to, and with tapes, with albums, at least you could just pick up the needle and move it. Tapes, you had to press rewind. It'd be like, zzz, you have to, yeah, to try to get the right song. So you have the double cassette, and you know the one that does the recording, and you would have to fast forward and take you however long, and you'd be too far. Go to back, forward, back, forward, back.
That's right.
Got it right.
And maybe you're on the wrong side.
Yeah. It just went, it was an endless struggle to try to get the right mixtape. I totally remember it. I will say this, that's the one benefit now with iTunes and these types of platforms. You make a playlist, it's like bing, bang, boom, you're done. And you got your playlist ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well, hey, bud, I want to thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. And we gotta do this again, because it's always such pleasure. It's always such a pleasure talking with you, Todd. Thanks so much, buddy.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the invite. And anytime you want to do it again, I'm down.
Right on, bud. Take care.
All right, have a great day. Take care.
I want to thank Todd for coming on the pod today. It's always a bit of a mind bender when I chat with him. And this is just a small sample of Todd's knowledge in the field of addiction therapy. If you would like to know more about Todd and what he does, you can go to www.trynaps.com. That's trynaps.com. You can also go to www.rebootyourbrain.com. He also has a TriNaps Facebook page and Instagram. And just so you know, NAPS stands for Neural Alignment Psychedelic System, not taking a nap and going to sleep. Also, if you are really, really in need of help right now, he said you can call him at 694-356-9197. That's 694-356-9197. If you or anyone you know is having a tough time right now and would like some kind of help, just extend your hand, man, and encourage them to seek the help they deserve. Well, that's it. Thanks again for listening. I'll leave you with a little something I jammed out last night. I don't have a name for it, so let me think. Let's call it Dusty's Shuffle and E. Happy holidays, everyone. And remember, stay safe, stay connected, and God bless.